A midlife crisis is more than just a cultural stereotype. It's a real psychological struggle that can surface between the ages of 40 and 60. Often triggered by aging, loss, or unmet expectations, it can actually lead individuals to question their identity, make impulsive choices, or abruptly abandon long term commitments. While not officially classified yet as a mental illness, the emotional and relational fallout is very real, especially for the spouses and families left behind. This podcast gives voice to those living through the aftermath, exposing the hidden pain, and seeking accountability, healing, and understanding. Thank you for joining us today on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. The stories and events discussed in this podcast are for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Any names, locations, or identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. Any similarities to actual persons, living or dead, or real events are purely coincidental. The information presented on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Always consult with a qualified expert regarding any decisions related to your specific situation. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the podcast creators. Hey guys, thanks for joining us today on MLC Bomb Drop and Beyond. I wanted to roll back and start with a little historical information today on midlife crises and how it came to be that we call it a midlife crisis. Because before we called it midlife crisis, what did people call it? Because trust me, this behavior, as what we now call midlife crisis, it is not new. And when we hear the phrase midlife crisis today, most of us instantly picture the cliches. I know I did. The red sports car, the affair, the toupee, the sudden career quit. But you know what? The term itself is actually pretty new. It was only coined in the 1960s by a Canadian psychoanalyst named Elliot Jacques. And before then, well, people were living it and their families were living through it for sure, but they didn't have the words. They just called it something else. Apparently, back in the early 20th century, you might have heard someone say a man was going through a second adolescence, because it sure feels like that, a second adolescence or a second youth. He's restless, he's chasing thrills, acting immature, denying the reality of aging, which, aging, I just want to say for the record, I think aging is a gift. As far as I'm concerned, dude, if you're not aging, you're 6 feet under. So be glad you're aging. Not everybody is awarded that opportunity. Too many folks are their lives are cut short. Some don't even make it to birth. So aging is a total gift and it should be embraced. Anyway, that's just me. So for women, it was often called the change of life. That phrase tied everything to menopause, but it also carried the idea that women just weren't themselves anymore. And then there was the phrase almost everybody used called, quote unquote, a nervous breakdown. I know that's what a lot of folks thought was happening in my situation with my spouse. They thought he was having a nervous breakdown or had a brain tumor. But anyway, nervous breakdown, that's the catch-all term when someone suddenly unravels under the weight of life. They walk away from their marriage, they abandon their responsibilities, or they start acting restless. Families would whisper that they were losing their mind because a rational person looks at that behavior and totally thinks, oh my God, that person has lost their mind. So even doctors had a word for it. I believe they used to call it climacteric. It meant a biological turning point around midlife, a kind of natural crisis linked to aging. So while the word midlife crisis didn't exist, the reality did. Families were blindsided, just like we are today. Spouses were discarded. Children left confused. Entire lives were upended, all under the labels of nervous breakdown, change of life, going mad, or simply losing their mind. It wasn't until the 1960s that Jacques reframed it as a developmental stage, a psychological turning point where people confront mortality, lost dreams, and unmet needs. And that is when midlife crisis entered our vocabulary back in the 60s. And here's the kicker: giving it a name didn't make it any less destructive, but what it did was open the door for us all to talk about it, study it, and hopefully stop sweeping the wreckage under the rug, which is still done today. Because whether you call it a nervous breakdown, a change of life, or midlife crisis, one thing has not changed, and that is the families that are left behind. They are the ones who pay the price. But let's not miss this. The MLCer pays too. At first, they look like the one who got away. The escape, the affair partner, the reinvention. It all looks so shiny in the beginning, but the bill always comes due. And you know what? That MLCer is going to pay with their integrity. Their word no longer means anything. They have no credibility. They abandon everybody that they swore to love and take care of. They pay with their relationships. Children who now distance themselves. Families who no longer trust them. I mean, how can you trust somebody who one day says one thing and the next day it's a complete change of mind and behavior? Credibility is out the door. They pay financially, in divorce, in court, sometimes even in criminal fallout from all the lies and false accusations that they put out there. And eventually, sadly, they pay with their own emotional collapse. Because when the excitement fades, they are left with regret, emptiness, and the reality of now aging alone. And the demons that they were trying to run away from and escape from are still there. They still haven't been addressed. So yeah, you guys, everyone pays. The family pays immediately in devastation and betrayal, but the MLCer pays later in regret and loss. The timelines are different, but the damage is universal. Okay, so now that we have a little history on midlife crisis, nervous breakdown, and how that all came to be, you know, my next question is why is this, no matter what we're going to call it, um, why is it not in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders? That is the book that defines what's considered a mental illness in America. And it just boggles my mind because this is such a mental health issue. Every day, families like yours and mine are destroyed by what can only be described as a total psychological break in middle adulthood, an identity implosion that leaves devastation in its wake. So why isn't midlife crisis disorder recognized? And what can we do to change that? Because if you know me, the one thing about Trina Laird is that I don't let things just sit. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed, if something has to change in the world, I will see to it that come hell or high water, we are going to change it. And it's time, you guys. It is time that we stick together and get midlife crisis disorder, however we want to call it. It is time it needs to get into the DSM. So let's start with the basics. The DSM isn't just a list of feelings, it's actually a catalog of clinically proven disorders. To make it in, they have a condition has to check some serious boxes. First, scientific validity. There must be consistent research showing it's a distinct pattern, not just stress or personality. Okay, MLC, total distinctive pattern. That's for sure. Reliability, which is number 2. Clinicians must be able to diagnose it the same way across cases. Well, considering that all these spouses act like absolute aliens and have the exact same behavior, I would think that that would be pretty easy for clinicians to diagnose. All right, number 3, clinical significance. It has to cause measurable distress or impairment in work, family, or relationships. Well, hello, check, check, check. Very measurable distress or impairment. Item number 4 for the DSM. has to have a cross-cultural presence. It can't just exist in one social group or country. Well, okay, we we have people on here. This is clearly worldwide. We have somebody in our groups from almost every country I can imagine. So check, check, check. That's another thing. Treatment relevance. By recognizing it, it must help people heal more effectively. Well, that's clear. If it can be recognized as the disorder that it is, maybe people could heal easier in a shorter time frame without so much destruction. So, um, without all that, without those things, the American Psychiatric Association would say, well, it's not a disorder. But you know what? It is a disorder because it clearly checks off all 5 of those things: scientific validity, reliability, clinical significance, cross-cultural presence, and treatment relevance. So again, the idea of a midlife crisis came from psychoanalyst Elliot Jacques back in 1965. He saw middle-aged men suddenly panic about aging, mortality, and meaning. Later, psychologist Daniel Levinson and author Gail Sheehy turned it into pop psychology. And I remember reading Gail Sheehy's books when I was just a teenager in high school. I think first because they had cute cover, and second because I was really into psychology. So, but here's the catch. The DSM only includes conditions that are consistently pathological. And midlife crisis, as the field that defines it, is considered a developmental phase, not a mental illness. So that's right. They call it a transitional challenge, just like adolescence. Never mind that it can trigger psychotic-like detachment, impulsive affairs, rage, and the complete destruction of families. The APA sees MLC as normal distress. But anyone who's lived through the bomb drop knows this is not normal. This is a total collapse of identity, a kind of dissociative break fueled by fear, regret, and shame. And another reason it's not listed is because it overlaps with existing diagnoses. And those diagnoses are depression, adjustment disorder, narcissistic collapse, mania, dissociative episodes, which we see all of those. I'll repeat them: depression, adjustment disorder, narcissistic collapse, mania, and dissociative episodes. Classic MLC behavior and symptoms. So instead of recognizing the unique cocktail of symptoms, like the impulsivity, the personality switch, the amnesia-like detachment, they lump it under other labels. That's like calling a hurricane a windy day. Seriously, you guys. So let's talk about what happens when a diagnosis does not exist. Okay, without a DSM code, insurance will not cover treatment. Without a DSM code, the courts can't order evaluation or therapy. Without a DSM code, family court judges misread behavior as voluntary. Without a DSM code, spouses are labeled bitter or hysterical instead of traumatized. Victims of an MLC-driven discard often experience PTSD-like symptoms, but because the person in crisis is not mentally ill, this is in quotes, not mentally ill, they get full legal autonomy while operating in a delusional fog. That means they can file for divorce, they can rewrite history, devastate children, all while untreated. Meanwhile, families are left to pick up the shards, and the clinicians we turn to, most don't even have language for what's happening. And I saw that firsthand. Eye rolling from counselors and therapists. Total eye rolling. They reach for adjustment disorder or situational depression, but that doesn't capture the transformation we see. The possession-like detachment that steals empathy and conscience. And I saw this in family court, therapists, everywhere. It really needs to be addressed and recognized for the mental disorder that it is, whether it's permanent, temporary, because you know what? In this temporary stage, it still lasts anywhere from 2 to 10 years, and it's destructive to somebody's full life. So it's just mind-boggling. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's totally unacceptable that MLC is not in the DSM. This is just, it's a real insult to our society. So, what would it take for MLC to be recognized? Well, we need longitudinal studies proving this isn't just stress and that it's a measurable identity breakdown with neurological, hormonal, and behavioral markers. And I have had doctors tell me that they can um, run blood panels and show that it's hormonal. So we know that. And clearly, if somebody had a brain scan, you can see the differences neurologically. Your universities, trauma recovery institutes, even private clinicians, they could collect case data from all of us left behind spouses and from the MLCers that are willing to be seen. Um, we need defined criteria, like symptom clusters might include sudden personality change and empathy loss, because we see that. The other criteria, compulsive life abandonment or affair behavior from people who would never go and have an affair or abandon their family. Then you see the dissociation and emotional numbing known as shark eyes, grandiose reinvention and delusional justification, rage toward long-term attachment figures, impulsivity, reckless spending, substance escalation. Those are all standard things that we all see in MLC. Clinicians could test the criteria for reliability. A work group could submit the research to the American Psychiatric Association during the next DSM revision cycle. Advocacy, we can have survivors, therapists, and advocates unite to raise awareness through podcasts like this, articles, conferences, and congressional hearings on the family court and mental health blind spot. You guys, this process can take a decade or more, but change starts when someone names what others refuse to see. And we all name it for what others refuse to see. If we can get this changed, at least our children, when they get married 10, 20 years from now, they have a better chance of keeping their family intact if a spouse can be recognized as having or being in MLC. And what you guys can do, you can start documenting your stories. Keep notes of the behavioral changes that you witness, because this becomes data. Encourage trauma-informed therapists to record and publish anonymized case studies. Support research and petitions for MLC to be formally studied under identity disturbance or trauma categories. Educate family law professionals. I know this is an uphill battle, but judges, attorneys, mediators, we need to educate them about the cognitive and emotional impairment of a person in active crisis. I saw this firsthand. Join advocacy groups, push for recognition of midlife identity collapse as a legitimate mental health concern. Because the moment a condition has a name and a code, society stops calling it drama and they start calling it a diagnosis. This is huge. Midlife crisis, yeah, it isn't in the DSM yet, but history shows that when the suffering becomes undeniable, the system evolves. To be included in the DSM, a proposed mental condition must have substantial clinical research showing that it exists as a distinct and identifiable pattern of symptoms, reliable diagnostic criteria, clinicians must be able to identify it consistently, validity, the condition must reflect a genuine and distinct mental or behavioral dysfunction, not just a social trend, cultural norm, or moral judgment. For example, you guys, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is PMDD, that was added to DSM-5 after years of controlled studies showing consistent biological, psychological, and behavioral patterns that distinguish it from regular PMS. A disorder must cause significant distress like emotional suffering, anxiety, depression, impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. If symptoms are unusual but don't disrupt a person's life meaningfully, they usually don't qualify for DSM inclusion. But with all of us here on Bomb Drop, we know that this completely disrupts a person's life meaningfully, and not just one person's life, but the lives of many people. The proposed condition must be distinct from existing DSM diagnoses. Researchers have to show that how it differs from other disorders in cause, symptoms, and treatment. Well, check. We have all that. It must be shown to occur across different populations, not just a cultural or regional phenomenon, unless the DSM specifies it as culture-bound. The DSM-5 work groups carefully review global data to ensure the diagnosis isn't biased toward one cultural or gender perspective. And you guys, we are worldwide. Worldwide, we are seeing the MLC bomb drop situation. And the diagnosis, once we have it, it can help clinicians understand the patient's problems better, guide treatment and prognosis, and improve communication among professionals and patients. If a proposed disorder doesn't add clarity or change treatment outcomes, it's unlikely to be included. And we now have enough knowledge and experience and case studies to know that there are ways to treat this, to shorten outcomes and help all parties involved. Here's a proposed diagnostic framework, you guys. Maybe midlife identity collapse disorder, MICD, or midlife crisis disorder, MLCD. Core features would be a distinct and abrupt personality and identity shift in adults aged 35 to 65, typically triggered by existential, relational, or mortality stressors. Disruption of stable identity, values, and empathy, resulting in impaired functioning. At least 4 of the following must be present. So I've got like 7 symptoms, and maybe it could be based on 4 of the following symptoms. Sudden rejection of long-term attachments like spouse, family, or career. Grandiose reinvention or impulsive lifestyle overhaul. Number 3, emotional numbing or dissociative detachment like shark eyes. Number 4, rage or hostility toward previously loved individuals. Number 5, reckless or self-destructive behaviors like affairs, spending, addiction. Number 6, moral disengagement or delusional justification. Number 7, observable cognitive dissonance or memory distortion. These symptoms cause significant impairment in social, occupational, and family functioning. And what happens when we don't have a DSM inclusion? Therapists lack consistent language to diagnose or treat MLC-related breakdowns. Courts misinterpret irrational behavior as intentional. Families lose legal protection and insurance support. And the person in crisis, they often go untreated for years. The result is emotional, financial, and legal devastation for entire families, locally, globally, worldwide. It is time we stand up and change this. You know, history shows that when the suffering becomes undeniable, the system evolves. PTSD did not exist until Vietnam. Complex trauma wasn't named until survivors demanded it. Well, maybe it's time we do the same. If you've experienced the bomb drop, the betrayal, the lies, the fog, you already know this is not just a phase. It's a psychological emergency with collateral damage. Let's make sure the world starts treating it that way. You know, again, they call PTSD shell shock until soldiers refused to stay silent. They called complex trauma overreacting until survivors spoke up and united. And they'll call midlife crisis a phase until we prove it's something far deeper. So come on, you guys, it's far deeper, and we're going to change this and get this disorder in the DSM. Thanks for joining us today. Talk to you again soon on MLC, Bomb Drop, and Beyond. Hey, some resources that I want you guys to check out. Scratch that. Hey, some resources that are available for you guys are thewifeexpert.com. That's Lori McDermott over there at thewifeexpert.com. She also has a new app out. There's tons of videos that can give you all kinds of information on no matter where you are on your MLC journey or trying to reconcile with your spouse. So check out thewifeexpert.com. And if you're not sure if your spouse or yourself is in maybe approaching or in a midlife crisis, be sure to check out Kenda Ruth's quiz at marriage. Be sure to check out Kenda Ruth's quiz at Midlife Crisis marriageadvocate.com. Again, that's a midlife crisis, marriageadvocate.com. That's a quick little 2-minute quiz. It's free. So check that out as well. We have a ton of resources out there for you guys. So check them out. Thanks. You guys, forward moving spouses, you are not alone. Left behind spouses, you are not alone. Those in crisis, you are certainly not alone. This is just crazy how epidemic this has become. I have a waiting list now of people from around the world that I'm trying to get to. And if you've been through a midlife crisis or been impacted by someone else's and you want to share your story, I'd love to hear from you. Hang in there, you guys. I will get to all of you. Please reach out to me at mlcbombdrop@gmail.com and visit us on Facebook and Instagram, MLC Bombdrop. And just remember, your voice matters. Your story could be the one that helps someone else feel seen. It could help someone else feel heard. And it will help somebody else feel understood. You are not alone, no matter where you are in your journey. If the bomb was just dropped, the earthquake just happened, if you are 7 or 8 years in and you're coming out of starting to wake up and awaken to this, you are not alone. It's sad that this is epidemic, but we're here to provide support. So until next time, take care and live authentically each and every day. Thanks again, you guys.